Spring planting is here, and with the uncertainty of soil temperatures, diseases, and moisture, protecting your seed with a quality seed treatment is vital. On this episode, we sit down with seed treatment brand manager Tony Lourens to learn about his innovative portfolio of seed treatments that the Helena Products Group has to offer for your farm. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville to discuss how the recent U.S. naval blockade is impacting oil and commodity prices, and he'll share with us some insight on how growers can take advantage of this big market swing. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith. On this episode, we are going to talk about a really important part of agriculture, and that's seed treatments. As growers get ready to plant 26, they need to be thinking about what's on my seed. And joining us today in the FieldLink studio is Tony Lourens. Tony is the brand manager for seed treatments for the Helena Products Group. Tony, welcome to FieldLink.
Thanks, Bill. Really grateful to get this invitation. I've actually been involved in seed treatments directly for 25 years, so feel like I've got a good foundation. Look forward to sharing some insights.
Yeah, Tony, let's dig into that a little bit. You're one of what I would consider one of the global experts when it comes to seed treatments. And tell us a little bit about you. Where's home? How did you get here? And how did you get involved in seed treatments?
You know, I originally came to America, got a scholarship to go to LSU in ag, and have been in ag ever since I graduated. I got involved in seed treatments right when seed treatments really were starting to gain momentum in the US. So I got involved in seed treatments around 2000, and really there were no seed treatments, certainly no seed treatments in the Mid-South. I was with Syngenta at the time, and they gave me a sales position to develop the southern market. So they moved me to Memphis, and I had the rice market, the soybean market, the cotton market, all of which we had zero sales in at the time. So it was a fun market to be involved in. Syngenta at the time had some new technology that was really interesting, and it was a fun business to be involved in.
I was also a part of Syngenta in the early 2000s when we started introducing some of those unique seed treatment products, especially in the soybean market up in Nebraska, and a really, really exciting time. And boy, this industry has absolutely evolved over the last 25, 26 years, hasn't it, Tony?
Oh, it's actually absolutely phenomenal. When I arrived here in 2000, soybean seed treatments were almost unheard of. A few farmers would buy apron in little containers, put it in little cement mixer type application equipment that they actually owned and operated.
Right.
So there was a little apron going out, and there was a little Vitavax going out. But across the soybean market, as a percent of total acres planted, I would very much doubt that even 1% of the soybean acres were actually getting a seed treatment.
Well, and you know, that was right during that transition time with Roundup Ready technology coming into the seed business, and all of a sudden growers started to realize that, oh, I'm not running run beans as much as I used to, and I'm really investing into my genetics. I really need to protect that genetic germplasm, hence the evolution of seed treatments.
You know, you're absolutely right. That was one of the big drivers. And so here was the thinking for most growers around the year 25 years ago. I'm going to plant seed. I know I'm going to lose some of my stand. I'm just going to plant so much it'll overcome any stand losses. And really since then, there have been 5 significant developments that have absolutely revolutionized the way farmers treat seed, specifically around seed treatments. And I would categorize those into 5 areas. The first one being the recognition that plant population doesn't determine yield. Really what determines yield and higher yields is getting an early, even stand that's evenly spaced in the field. That's the best way to optimize or maximize your yield. The other thing I think that occurred, and still is occurring today, is farmers are trying to plant earlier and earlier. They find if they can control seedling diseases, that's the best way to optimize or maximize yield. So planting dates gotten earlier and earlier, and that's still moving forward today. They're still trying to find ways to plant the seed a little earlier.
Well, and they're fighting for the daylight, right? That has a lot to do with it. Longer days, the longer that bean's up and out, the more productive it can be.
Absolutely. The other dynamic being rainfall. You typically start running into some dry months in the summertime. If your plant's mostly developed by then, you've got a better chance at getting better yields. And then, of course, irrigation offsets some of that. So certainly that earlier planting is continuing today. They're still trying to find a window to make that earlier and earlier. The third thing is farmers really, really do not want to replant. There's so many costs associated with replants. Farmers want to avoid it if at all possible. The fourth thing I'd say is seed. As you pointed out, it's got a lot more technology on it. It's a lot more expensive. Farmers don't think about planting a bag of seed. They think about protecting every single seed and getting it to germ and be healthy. And then the final thing is seed treatments have developed tremendously. The technology around chemistry is so much better today than it was 25 years ago. The application equipment also has evolved, is much better today than it was 25 years ago.
Wow, those are three really, really important points, Tony. Let's dig into them a little bit deeper here. Let's talk a little bit more about, the importance of that good, healthy stand.
Yeah, so what's really important, and here's how we've discovered this. Research throughout the country. We've got some tremendous researchers that are out in the field. One of the really big dynamics is this group of growers who always want to increase yield. That's kind of been a focus, high yield soybeans. How do we do it? And one of the keys, the foundation that they've discovered is, hey, I need a healthy stand. I need an even stand. I need the seed to come up evenly, and then I need to plant it and space it evenly in the field. That's the foundation to a high yield soybean.
Yeah, because if those beans or corn or cotton or whatever the crop may be are coming up at different times, they essentially become competition of each other, don't they?
Absolutely, and that's what they want to try and avoid. Today you look at a really good field of soybeans, and it's like someone almost mowed it. It looks that even.
Yeah.
It's really good to see.
Tony, back in my day when we were in the seed business, starting off, soybeans, they'd come in a 50-pound bag. I mean, we were throwing 50-pound bags all the time, but we've seen a major transition, haven't we, in the last 25 years to go to bulk.
Yeah, I remember talking to a number of my growers back 20-something years ago, and they'd say, oh, yeah, I'm going to buy my seed, and I'm going to focus on getting the small seed because I pay less for it. Ultimately, he plants the smaller seed, you get the same 50-pound bag, you get a lot more seed in the 50-pound bag. They thought that was a way of cutting costs. Today, you can't do that.
Right.
You buy a bag of seed, it's got 140,000 seeds in the bag, and the focus has changed. Now it's how do I protect every one of those seeds? Because it's a significant investment.
It definitely is. And, and those planting dates continue to change and shift, don't they?
They really do. The challenge with that is, so you want to plant earlier, but that's when it's cooler, that's when it's wetter, that's when you have more seedling disease. So you've got to be cognizant of that. If you can manage that, planting earlier makes a lot of sense because farmers are averaging better yields the earlier they plant.
Yeah, definitely. And every grower out there, especially now, the headlines right now is fuel expenses, diesel, and so on and forth. That's a major factor when we talk about replanting, not to mention the cost of time as well as seed costs.
You hit the nail on the head. So think about this if you're a farmer. You're probably farming larger acres. You've got to get across a lot of land. The last thing in the world you want to do is have to replant. And so there are the direct costs involved with replants. You might have to rework the field. You've got fuel costs, you've got time costs. Those are huge when you're trying to get more crops in the ground. But you know what the actual biggest cost, I think, for a farmer is, Bill? Mm-hmm. So imagine this. You lose a stand. 4 weeks later, you actually can get back in the field and replant. Well, guess what? Your variety's probably changed. Your maturity group, soybean group, has probably changed. And then most importantly, your yield potential probably has changed a lot. So I think the direct costs are huge. The biggest cost for a farmer, the thing that he loses sleep about is how much yield have I lost?
Right.
Because of the replant.
And they don't know until fall, correct?
Exactly right. And so the best Farmer wants to avoid replants. Everyone knows that. The best insurance for a replant is a really good seed treatment done by a professional that puts the right amount of chemistry on each seed evenly. I think that's what's become really important to farmers. And we actually see this in the statistics. So back when I got started in seed treatments, close to zero soybeans got a seed treatment. Today, believe it or not, 80% of soybean seed not only gets a seed treatment, it gets a combination of fungicide plus insecticide. Another 10% of that seed gets a fungicide-only seed treatment, and typically that's on double crop beans, maybe where the yield potential isn't as high. Bottom line is 90% of the soybeans today, on average, get a seed treatment.
Right. And many of them are being treated, as you pointed out, by a professional, correct?
Yes, indeed. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit towards the end of this conversation, but
Sure.
Helena's invested heavily in equipment, in training our seed treatment professionals how to treat seed. Certainly you want to get every bang for your buck when you pay for a seed treatment.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely we'll dig into that one because that is a huge area that often gets overlooked by growers. So, Tony, tell us a little bit about the foundation that establishes high yield. Tell us why seed treatments are a part of that.
It's all about getting an early, even stand, getting every seed you plant coming back, or most of the seed you plant, the large majority of the seed you plant, coming up early, coming up evenly, and being healthy. That creates the foundation to, I like to say, optimize yield. Some farmers would say maximize yield, but the only way you get that is if you don't have any seedling diseases that hurt that emergence, you don't have any insects that hurt that emergence.
So, Tony, there's a lot of choices out there in seed treatments, and Helena has a wide offering here. Tell us about some of those choices for seed treatments and how important they are based on where a grower lives and really how they farm and what kind of crops they're growing.
Yeah, Helen has actually invested a tremendous amount of money in identifying solutions that help farmers, providing a way for them to get the best stands to optimize their yields. And so we've got a tremendous seed treatment portfolio. We're proud of the solutions it provides the growers. To discuss this, let's look at the key issues, the key problems growers are going to run into as they plant the soybean seed, particularly in these environments where they're trying to plant earlier and earlier. And remember, it's cooler, it's wetter. So it doesn't matter if you're planting your seed in Bunkie, Louisiana, which is pretty south, or close to the Canadian border. Guess what you're going to run into, regardless of the soil type? Pythium. Pythium's pretty bad. It can wipe out a stand, and hey, that leads to replants. You do not want that to happen. So Pythium probably is one of the biggest seedling diseases we absolutely have to manage. The other key seedling disease we really have to manage is Phytophthora, probably more of a problem in a lot of the Midwest states, but still a big problem. It can wipe out stands. You can't talk about seedling diseases without talking about Fusarium and Rhizoctonia. Typically, they won't wipe out a stand, Bill, but they're going to reduce yield. The soybean plant just won't be as healthy. It won't be as productive if you don't manage those seedling diseases early in the game.
And it can kind of be that hidden thing a little bit that really impacts yield, and you can't always see it, right, Tony?
Yeah, I've sometimes used the analogy. It's a little like a cancer that doesn't kill, but it hurts, and it hurts yield. And ultimately, the way farmers make money, it's all about yield, and we need to provide the inputs that help the farmer optimize his yield.
Okay, Tony. So as we talked about earlier, there's lots of choices for growers out there. What do you typically recommend for growers today in terms of what brands should I really focus in on?
A really good question, Bill. So let's look at the diseases we spoke about, and then how do we address these diseases? We've got two products we think every farmer should choose either one of these products. So, for example, Seed Shield Max, probably more of a product for the southern market right now. It's actually got 4 fungicides. built into the formulation. So regardless, you got Pythium, Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, Fusarium, several other diseases like the Phomopsis complex. This is an outstanding choice. It'll take care of those diseases. Another choice is Seed Shield Select. It's actually got 5 fungicides built into the formulation. Will do an outstanding job on all the seedling diseases. In addition to that, it's got asset formulation technology built in, so that tends to be a root stimulant, help with root development. Either of those 2 products are great choices.
And those products are really unique to Helena, correct?
They are. And the thing I'd like to mention about those products is, look, they'll take care of your seedling diseases, but you also got to think about insects.
Definitely, for sure, you got to take care of that. And it's amazing to me, Tony, some of these products, you referenced Seed Shield Select, for example, with asset formulation, 5 fungicides. We've got 5 fungicides working around that seed treatment, don't we?
Yeah, actually, so if you look at the formulation, 7 technologies built into that formulation. I've said before, we've got a phenomenal seed treatment portfolio. Certainly, this is an outstanding product. I'd put it up against any other product in the market. By the way, if anyone would like to challenge us, Bill, we'd love that challenge. We'd love to do some side-by-side tests.
I'm glad you bring that up. We do a lot of testing, and we like to take the challenge on, don't we? None of these treatments are going to be released unless they're showing a true value, aren't they, Tony?
We spend a tremendous amount of money on research, A, to develop new products, B, to find new technologies that help the farmer grow better soybean crops. We actually spend hundreds of thousands of dollars looking into that, finding the best products, best new products for the farmer.
And we lean into those third-party researchers who are giving us this independent, view of how those products are performing.
You're exactly right. One of the unique things I think Helena Products Group does that other people don't do is we do work through third-party researchers a lot. Here's the neat thing I think we do. They have no idea what they're testing. We give them numbered compounds. Do not tell them what those numbered compounds are. So when we get our results back, it truly is an unbiased opinion and actual results of what those products will do, in this case, seed treatments. We are very, very comfortable saying we'd love to challenge anyone who thinks they have a better seed treatment than us, because we've tested our products against what other people think are the best products. And the reason we launched Seed Shield Max and Seed Shield Select, they were the best products on the market.
I think that's very comforting for growers to know that we're leaning at the Helena Products Group on third-party researchers to say, yes, this product exceeded expectations.
You're exactly right. And the other thing I'd like to mention about Seed Shield Max and Seed Shield Select is we actually chose the insecticide that we haven't spoken about that's part of each one of those formulations. We specifically chose thiamethoxam. Thiamethoxam, to be honest, in our opinion, and certainly this is verified or validated by research, is the best soybean seed treatment insecticide on the market. So if you're in the Midwest, you've heard about it.
I'm from Nebraska. I hear about it all the time. We got lots of things, aphids and bean leaf beetles going on all the time.
You're exactly right. So those are probably the 2 biggest. Wireworm in some geographies, pretty big as
definitely.
Well. Now, here's the challenge. Imagine you're a grower in the South. You've got those 2 bugs, but then you've also got thrips. You've got grape colaspis. You've got 3-cornered alfalfa hopper, a whole host of insects. So the insecticide becomes a really, really important consideration. And that's why it was so important that we included thiamethoxam as part of these formulations that were developed. The other thing I'd say about thiamethoxam is, you put thiamethoxam on a seed, it comes out of the soil. It's just typically a little greener. It comes out a little quicker, something we call the vigor effect.
Right.
And that's a big reason we chose thiamethoxam as our insecticide. What that means to the grower is the crop comes out a little earlier, grows out a little quicker, and ultimately you get your canopy a little earlier, and that means weeds are a little easier to control as well.
Wow. Well, Tony, as we chat about Seed Shield Max and Seed Shield Select, you guys really have your bases covered for seedling diseases and early insect protection. What else do you want to share with growers today on this podcast?
I'm glad you asked that question, Bill, because across all soybean acres, you probably want to use Seed Shield Max or Seed Shield Select. But what if you have a problem like Southern Death Syndrome? Well, there's some really good bolt-on technologies, bolt-on choices that we think you should consider. So Seed Shield Max or Seed Shield Select by themselves will not control SDS or Southern Death Syndrome. And you know Southern Death Syndrome can be devastating. But what we do have is bolt-on technologies that are really good. So a couple of years ago, we identified and then developed a unique technology branded as New Vigor, provides outstanding SDS protection. So we definitely ask you to consider that if you are concerned about SDS. Get with our product managers, our product specialists. They can give you a lot more information on it. But it's become pretty much a standard seed treatment if you've got SDS in many areas.
And I think that's the key, that you need to know, is my area susceptible to SDS? And a lot of growers know that. Or if they're uncertain, they should talk to the Helena rep, right?
You know, exactly right. The other thing we'd ask people to think about is, do you have nematode pressure?
Yeah.
So number one is if you've got something like a cyst nematode, it tends to aggravate the SDS to some extent. But regardless, if you've got a cyst nematode or a root knot nematode, so cyst you're going to run into in quite a few of the Midwest acres, root knot probably more prevalent in some of the sandier areas in the southern geography. Regardless, they both can be very damaging to soybeans, and we've got a really good solution for that. We launched a product called Syndicate this past fall. Does an outstanding job on all nematodes, both cyst and root knot. And then if you've got some other damaging nematodes like lesion, it'll help you manage those as well. Just a really good product. And the good thing, Bill, is if you put Seed Shield Max or Seed Shield Select on the soybean seed, for example, there's space to add both New Vigor and Syndicate.
Tony, you certainly have a huge portfolio here, a portfolio of products for soybeans. You know, we've got a lot of bases covered that we've already chatted about. There's still a few other opportunities out there. You know, inoculation is something that growers really need to be thinking about, especially as we get into plant 26 and we see some of those acres converting around, don't we?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Bill. Here's the unique thing. Farmers recognize, or many farmers recognize, they need rhizobium to supplement the rhizobium that's already in the soil. So we feel like probably 50% of the soybean seed we sell actually gets an inoculant. And we think this is a good decision. We think this year it's more important than other years to actually include an inoculant. And here's why. Number one is, in many areas, this has been an unusually wet year for both the winter and the spring.
Right.
That tends to reduce the amount of rhizobium in the soil. It's also been colder. And look, you're from the Midwest.
Yeah.
In some parts of the Midwest right now, it's really cold.
Yeah.
Look, that's going to reduce the amount of rhizobium in the soil.
Sure.
And then the other thing, you brought it up, if you've been going corn for a couple of years or cotton for a couple of years, and then you transition to soybeans, that rhizobium really isn't in the soil in the amounts that you need it. You really need a good inoculant. And so the inoculant we recommend here at HPG and at Helena is First Up Soybeans. It's actually got three components built into the inoculant itself. The first is an elite rhizobium strain that, regardless of geography, works just incredibly well, incredibly efficiently at helping with the initial rhizobium, nitrogen fixation, and nodulation. The second component we have is a biological fungicide. So the classic fungicides work really well, but they tend to run out after a while. Biologicals, just the way they work, tend to extend out that control. And then, so we have a biological fungicide built into First Up Soybeans.
Wow.
And then the third and final component is a technology that a lot of farmers are interested in, inertia. It really multiplies the microbial processes in the soil, makes water and nutrients more available, and also actually helps with the nodulation process as well. Just an outstanding product.
Tony, it's just amazing the amount of technology that's evolved in these last 25 years of seed treatments. And wow, you've really shared a lot of insight with us today here that you've been working on here at the Helena Products Group and evolving that portfolio. Earlier on, we talked about something that often gets overlooked, and that's the importance of the equipment, of how these multiple products are applied, and how scientific it is today compared to what it was, the cement mixers that we used 25 years ago. What's Helena doing different in this area today?
Bill, it truly is remarkable to look at how technology has advanced and grown and how Helena has embraced this technology. So first of all, we've discussed the various chemistries, and we haven't discussed all of them.
Right.
We've got a big portfolio. We just don't have time to dig into all of it.
And we got more coming.
I know. It's so fun. It's exciting to be part of this truly remarkable field. The other thing I'd like to bring up is, so we've got this great chemistry, but how do you know it's on the seed? Yeah. And that's what's evolved remarkably as well is the evolution of seed treatment application technology. I'll just tell you this, Helena has invested large sums of money in getting the very, very best equipment at their locations to put this chemistry, these brands on the seed. Look, doesn't matter how good the chemistry is, if you don't have it on every seed, evenly on every seed, right, really the money's wasted.
Especially with the right rate. You've got to have that right rate and loading, if you will.
Exactly right. So you need the right equipment. We just mentioned this. Helena has invested in the best equipment from the best manufacturers out there. We invest money from companies like KSI, USC, what we consider the two best equipment seed treatment application equipment manufacturers in the country today. Helena's invested heavily in getting this equipment to their locations. The equipment by itself is good, but you really need to be able to, you really need a professional applicator who's trained to use that equipment properly. Helena's invested both in the equipment and in the people, the professionals, to put this chemistry on the seed accurately and effectively.
I think that is a very important point, Tony. We can have the greatest chemistry in the world. We can have the best equipment, but if we don't have the right people to run it, and if they're not properly trained, it really doesn't matter, does it?
It doesn't. And Helena's invested in that, all of the features of both the people and the equipment. I really question, there's kind of been a trend in some areas where growers want to save money. We understand.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting the right chemistry and then you don't have the equipment or maybe the expertise to put that chemistry on the seed, let Helena, the professionals, do it for you. We've invested in both the people and the equipment.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Look, things are tough at the farm gate, certainly no doubt about it. But when you start to cut corners, you're likely going to cut yield, and it's going to impact your bottom line long term. So relying on, these inputs like we talked about, quality seed treatments that have gone through the third-party researchers, utilizing the equipment that is tried, trusted, and having the right people that have been trained properly to put it on that very expensive seed in some cases is really important for your ultimate yield success. Tony, want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink, sharing really 5 very, very significant developments that have impacted the seed treatment industry and providing us all this valuable insight that you have with your over 26 years of industry experience.
It was fun. It was a pleasure being here and an honor, Bill. Thank you.
And welcome back to FieldLink. And joining us from Nashville is Jody Lawrence. He's the editor for the FieldLink Market Report. Jody, we continue to hear and see, and everything we hear the tweets on and feel has to do with the Middle East. Boy, that's really impacting the markets, isn't it?
Happy Monday to everybody. It's good to be back on. And yeah, we have definitely seen since this started a month ago, really pushing almost 6 weeks now, that you have a definite kind of, I don't know whether they're just trying to set the stage for everyone to be paying attention to Washington or negotiations, but so much stuff has happened over the weekends after the close on Friday, even with the big time difference. And we were getting these hugely volatile reactions, and it's been almost all positive to this point because crude oil has jumped. Today's news was the naval blockade of the Straits of Hormuz that President Trump has ordered because weekend negotiations, they agreed on about 80%, but Iran will not back off their nuclear intentions. And I think Trump feels like while he's got his foot on their throat, he's just going to go ahead and seal the deal. And what we saw through the course of the day is even though crude was up about $5 or $6 on the initial open Sunday night, we didn't get back above $100 in the front contract on the U.S. Brent. And what we saw is over the past 5 weeks, you're beginning to see more reports and more news that Saudi Arabia, that other OPEC plus nations in the Middle East are opening pipelines to, rather than pump it to their ports that go out of the Straits of Hormuz, they're pumping it across the country to send it out of the Suez Canal. So you have diverted massive amounts of oil already that has taken out so much leverage from what Iran initially kind of projected to the world that will shut down the world's energy production out of this area, that everybody else had a contingency plan that they've put in place over the last month. And you can see that by the way the markets are reacting, because they're opening higher and then slowly and steadily selling off over the course of the day. And I think the most impressive thing, and we hadn't talked any ag specific things yet, but you look at what the stock market has been doing. Stock markets and all the equity indexes are up 8 straight days. And we are now back just a little bit below where we were before the war started and only 2% away from all-time highs. So I think you have a lot of markets that are looking past whatever's going to happen with the straits. And as they see the initial worst case scenarios of people talking about $150 oil and, massive inflationary increases across the board because of transportation and everything, that just, all those people have become the boy that cried wolf, because we certainly have not seen it. We got the bump in new crop and old crop corn and beans because the biofuel attachment that we now have, that's such a big part of our domestic and use and exports. But as those prices became less and less sensitive, we are now seeing the markets separate, or corn and bean prices separate themselves from what's happening in the energy markets to just trade on, okay, if we plant 96 million acres of corn, that's going to be a few too many corn acres. And if the weather, although it's been inconsistent, and I've gotten a lot of reports of complaints of too dry and too wet already within 200 miles of each other, that you just have to look forward. And that's what these markets are doing. They're saying, okay, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, what problems that we think we're dealing with now will already have solved themselves. And that's why we're getting the disconnect now between energy prices staying, at the high end of the range in the 90s, but now corn and beans just fractionally above where they were before we started the war.
Right. Jody, it just feels like after all of the turmoil here, especially over the weekend and now the blockade, and it's interesting to see these other OPEC nations finding other alternatives, as you mentioned and pointed out, using pipelines to go to different, ports and the Suez Canal you mentioned, different ways and methods. But it's also interesting to see other countries and nations go, well, where are some other sources? And right now, the United States seems to be a pretty good source for a lot of global needs in terms of oil.
Absolutely. And you look at, because through the years, you think back to when we were little kids, we can remember long gas lines in the 70s and even, before we even started driving. And that now we are the world's largest energy producer. Just stay on crude, natural gas is included in that. And also the world's largest exporter, which I don't think everybody understands, because there are different types of crude oil, how it's refined, whether it's going to unleaded or diesel, and some of the nuances of the market. But we are in such a different position than really we would have been probably even 20 years ago, because our energy independence makes actions like this, and whichever side of this you're on, I don't think anybody's going to argue that the world is not a safer place now than it was a month ago. So, through biofuels, through more energy efficiency, saw one report today, thought was really insightful. It talks about over the last 20 years, your car or whatever you're driving, and we're not even talking about electric or Tesla, your energy efficiency in mile per gallon is up almost 20 to 25%. So, yeah, I mean, there are just a lot of things. I think the only thing in this that everyone in our industry would love to see is that we now realize how sensitive our agricultural price inflation, food inflation is, that we begin to repatriate a lot of the fertilizer production, and whether that's an EPA issue and local issues. But if this wouldn't have even been a blip on the ag screen from a cost standpoint had fertilizer not been such a sensitive choke point right there at the straits.
Right. Yeah. Certainly a hot topic as it relates to agriculture. Certainly our immediate impact. Certainly oil is, but we've got alternative sources, as you just pointed out. And boy, we have come a long way since the 70s. In our first bout, I can remember those lines like you probably can, Jody. We can complain about our higher prices of gas at the pump. But the good news is we're not standing in line getting allocated gas like we were in the 70s. And I think that's really important for a lot of Americans to remember. It's kind of the same folks that we're talking about, getting crossways with. But boy, mistakes are a lot different now, aren't they?
They are, and you just look at what a big part of it with U.S. Just talk about the corn market. We produced a 17 billion bushel crop last year, and we're going to use over a third of that just for ethanol. That at between 95 and 2005 was just hey, maybe this industry might work and help out our corn producers, use a little more corn domestically and cut down some carbon footprints. I think that's probably even before anybody knew what a carbon footprint was. But yeah, certainly the last 25 to 30 years have dramatically changed how the long-term impact of Iran being off the world's market. Because, gosh, what I was in 7th or 8th grade during the Iran hostage when they freed them. So, yeah, that just shows you how long ago all this started.
Yeah. 47 plus years ago. That's crazy. Okay, Jody, let's talk a little bit about the commodities. Corn, what are we looking at right now?
Well, like we mentioned earlier, new crop and old crop prices are separating themselves from what's going on in the energy markets. They are concentrating on back to the simple fundamentals of supply, demand, and weather. And right now, you probably, the USDA will update us this afternoon, you probably have somewhere between 4 and 6% of the U.S. corn crop planted, about half that in beans, most of that obviously in the South, in the Southwest, and in the Delta. But we know it's moving up. Talked to a gentleman just in South Central Indiana today, and they're about halfway finished with their bean crop getting in the ground. And we're seeing changes through the years. And I know that theme of this week's podcast is about seed treatments and things, but you think about, gosh, 10, 15 years ago, it was always corn that was going in first, that beans were going to be the last thing when they could get around to it. But now, because of the treatments, they can make their workload and time schedule so much more efficient. And you've got to, and the bean crop is going to go in very quickly. In those areas, like you said, the U.S. forecast over the next 10 to 14 days, a lot of areas that are happy to get rain or probably got a little bit too much now. But when it begins to dry out, all of those, the new plant, the early emergence is going to come out in really, really good shape.
Yeah, that's right. And soybeans, what are you seeing there?
Soybeans have another interesting twist here. Brazil and Argentina's yields were record. We expected them to be. But with China's reliance on Iran, they get roughly 20 to 25% of their crude from Iran. And now with those naval blockades, we look forward or look ahead to the May 15th trade meeting between Trump and Xi, how much leverage and how much kind of change of agenda, I think would be probably a good way to look at that Trump can have now, and that China is probably coming to the table in a much weaker position than they were when it was supposed to be, April 1st or March 15th, whenever it was. So that's going to be really key moving forward on the bean price side. Obviously, we'd love to see China come in with a couple olive branches and buy more beans. And we've talked about all the totals before. Even throw in a few 100 million bushels of corn wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings, because we would like to see that trade relationship evolve into a much less contentious one. And we will see how that kind of transforms. But I think in the next month, beans, other than good weather, are going to be paying real close attention to the evolution of what's going to go on in those trade meetings in mid-May.
I think that's a big shocker for a lot of folks that didn't see that one coming. But, and I don't think a lot of people really understood how much petroleum and fuel Iran was providing to China. And that's really showing up now. And that they're desperate. 80-90% of their oil is coming from Iran. And oh boy, you cut that off for a few weeks or longer. That's a big deal. All of a sudden, China's probably going to be looking for their numbers two supplier. And again, that might be the United States, and create some opportunities for soybeans as well.
Yeah, I think in any government leader, whether it's, whatever you want to call it, communist, socialist, whatever China's going by these days, you get 1.8 billion people mad at you and you're the president, you're probably not going to be there a heck of a lot longer.
It's a tough day, isn't it? That's for sure. Okay, Jody, let's close this up. Let's talk a little bit about cotton. Let's not forget about that. What are some tendencies that you're seeing in the marketplace as it relates to cotton?
Cotton has been on a heater since this started for a couple different reasons. First of all, the dry Southwest plains, kind of Texas panhandle, as we knew the acreage was going to shrink a little bit. But with the rise in petroleum products, which goes into making nylon and other synthetic material, it became more expensive for the country. We'll just stay with China, who make the cheaper, and I'm not picking on Under Armour because I don't think their stuff is cheap, but the Under Armour type, more breathable fabrics than just 100% cotton. And as those petroleum-based byproducts started getting worked into clothing, cotton demand, we saw a very specific trend of more cotton being bought. When December cotton was in the mid 60s and we were up another $1 today, we're easily into the 70s. And in between the possibility of more cotton demand, potentially a better situation with China to where they would be buying more of our cotton to produce, and then we repatriate it back into shirts and pants and whatever, that cotton has got an interesting dynamic. And is it going back to 100? We'll have to just see how the weather reacts, but we're certainly in a much better position than we were a month ago on cotton price.
And it's just one other, I guess, thing I think it's important for us to point out, that this blockade, this conflict in Iran is certainly impacting agriculture. And you haven't heard a lot of chatter about cotton over the last 4 to 6 weeks.
No, you haven't. But if you look at it, the chart is very similar price action and percentage when you put it up against the energy markets, that there is a definite correlation that I don't think either one of us would have said, oh yeah, if crude goes to $100 a barrel, nylon and the products like that are going to go up, and cotton's going to add, because cotton's up almost 15% since this started.
Wow. Yeah. And that's good news for those cotton producers out there. Jody, a big week ahead of us. Lots going on. Lots of news changing really every minute. But we want to thank you for coming in, joining us here from Nashville today, and look forward to catching up next round, Jody.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. And now that everybody is out in the field, please be safe. This is one of the more dangerous parts of your year, so please keep an eye on everybody and be safe so that we can all get back together when we do this in a couple more weeks.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to contact your Helena representative to learn more about Testament corn herbicide.